Okay, so we're on day 2 of section 2. So we're still graphing rational functions. And now we are addressing what goes on when we change the expression in the denominator. And you had a little bit of this in your assignment from yesterday. Okay, so we're going to compare this function, y equals 1 over the entire x plus 2, to the parent function y equals 1 over x. So we want to graph the parent function. And I'm going to pause the video to graph the parent function, then we'll start the other. Okay, so there we have the parent function. And so now we're going to set up a table and identify the domain for the new function. So what value may not be input here? Negative 2. So all numbers except x may not equal negative 2. So I'm going to put negative 2 in my table as we did 0 before and just say this is the undefined place, right? So what does that give me? We were just talking about over here on the graph. Maddie?
Translation to left by 2.
Good, so we could actually draw in here the asymptote, right? She's predicting that the transformation is a translation, sliding it to the left, which is true. And the entire asymptote, the vertical one, has slid over. Okay? So we will not cross that. Make sure you do not cross that. Now, one thing we found, because this is a fraction that we're dealing with, is that we like to have fractions in our domain, right? So we don't just go with 1/2 and 1/4 anymore. We say, what is just a little bit greater than negative 2? A little bit, that's a little less. Negative 2.5 is a little less, but so negative 1.5, right? Negative 1.5, maybe negative 1 1/4, negative 1, 0. Those are greater. Am I going the wrong way? It doesn't matter which way you go, actually. And then if I'm going on the other side, a little less than negative 2, then if these two are exactly 1/2 apart, then I probably want to have that same kind of value on the other side. Okay, so I would go to what? Negative. What is 1/2 less than negative 2? Negative 2.5. She said negative 2.5, so you can write it that way. Negative 2 3/4, or 0.75, right? Negative 3, negative 4. Okay, so this is the tricky part here, determining fractions just to the greater or lesser side of that value that you cannot input. That's the tricky part. So once we do input, let's go with negative 1.5. If I put negative 1/2 into this equation, what is negative 1/2 plus 2? Positive 1/2. So I end up with 1 over 1/2, which is 2. We flip that. 1 divided by 1/2 equals 1 times 2 over 1, right? So it's 2. So let's try it again with the negative 1 1/4. What is negative 1 1/4 plus 2? Negative 1 1/4. Negative 1 1/4 plus 2. 2 is how? Oops, there you go. Catch up with us here. Pause the video and catch up with us. Okay, let's try it with negative 2 3/4. So 1 over negative 2 3/4 plus 2 is what? 1 over negative 3/4, right? So we're dividing by negative 3/4, or we're multiplying by negative 4/3, right? So the answer is negative 4/3 or negative 1 1/3, which is just like this one here, right? The opposite, because they're both the same distance away from that undefined value. Okay, so let's try negative 3. Plugging in negative 3. 1 over negative 3 plus 2 equals 1 over negative 1, which is negative 1. Plugging in negative 4. You end up with negative 1/2. Good. Does everyone understand how we're getting these?
Yes.
Okay, so now we go plot those on the graph. And I'm going to pause the video to do that. I mean, I don't know if this is enough information for you already, but given the fact that I drew in the asymptote, I have enough information to graph because I know what this is supposed to look like, right? But before I do, where is the horizontal asymptote? What y value may never be used? May never be hit, right? So you might want to draw that in because you are not to cross these axes, these asymptotes. And now we can, oops. Draw it in, okay? And then we do the same with the other branch. So we plug in -2.5 and we get -2. -2 3/4, we get -1 1/3. -3. -3, we have -1. This is probably easier to do on paper than it is on this thing. Anyway, -4, we have -half. 1, 2, 3, 4, -half. There you go. Okay, so we have that, the transformation that Maddie mentioned, it's a translation left 2. A translation left 2. Okay, questions? You will be seeing translations left, right, up and down, reflections, and stretches and shrinks today, so make sure you identify all of them. Okay, so let's do a little summary. What happens with the model equation? So we have the parent equation, which is the simplest function for a rational. Y equals 1 over x. That's just the parent. This is the model for all the possibilities that we can do to a rational function. We have y equals a over x minus h plus k. So let's identify what happens when we change each of these pieces. So what about a? If a, the entire value you're multiplying by increases, is greater than 1, what happens? Stretch. Good. And if that entire value is a value between 0 and 1, like 1/2, 1/4, shrink. What if the a value is negative? -2. Reflection. Good. So you have all those things.
But if a is greater than 1, it's not stretch.
As long as the entire a, you have to take into account what it's over. Like if we have this type of equation, you know, y equals 2 over 3x, really a is 2/3, not 2. Okay? So you have to say, what is the entire value worth? A. Okay? And then when it comes to k, that was the first value that we use to transform the rational function. If k is positive, what's the transformation? Up, right? Your horizontal asymptote moves up. What if k is negative? Down. Translation up or down. K is the horizontal asymptote. And then h, notice that in this model function, we're subtracting h. So h gives us the vertical asymptote, right? It talks about, it will let us know what type of left or right translation we have. As long as you're subtracting h, if you look at it that way, the h is the vertical asymptote. It's always hard to see that when we have a negative in the model function. In other words, when we looked at, I'm going to go over here for a second, what value we're not allowed to put in the domain here? -2. Do you see how if we subtract this is -2? Most people find it easier to say, which way are you moving? Look here at the x, what value can I not put in, right? You're moving left 2. But in the model function, we have x minus this. So this, in this case, would be -2. Your h is -2, okay? Okay, so here's your assignment. Please make sure that you are fully understanding how to do this. If you have questions, please see me, okay? And then don't forget your algebra cumulative packet through page 109 we'll correct tomorrow, and then we'll continue through the packet of review tomorrow while people are on that field trip.